All right. So this is Coach Jeff and Coach Jasmine. Jeff, thanks for coming on today. And
Thank you.
so the point of this little mini podcast is just to kind of get some more um, visibility on our coaching staff and let the parents and swimmers get to know us a little bit. We have such a big team and we're all over the place. So I know, I've been traveling to the other sites and I have kids who are like, who are you? Actually, I have kids who say, are you a swimmer? No. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Are you a new coach? So, just trying to get ourselves out there a little bit as the club we are. So today, Jeff's going to join me to talk about open water swimming a little bit. So, Jeff, first, do you want to tell everyone a little bit just about yourself, about what you do with LAC?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for having me. So again, my name is Jeff Pishko. So I'm the site director at the Northwest location, and I coach the national group there. We've been basically a site for just a little over 2 years now. So it's been a fun journey, and it's been exciting to see this site grow and develop a lot in a lot of different ways, both just in the pool and now like we're talking about today, some doing some open water things as well. I've been coaching for gosh, like 25 years now, so it's been a long time. I started out uh, when I was actually in college still, and had finished swimming in college at East Carolina University, and uh, started as an age group coach. At that point with the club team that was there, and I also coached with the college team. And so it just kind of started growing from there, and became a head coach of a team in Virginia. Was kind of my first head coaching stint, and have been with a few pretty high level programs around the southeast, with Chattahoochee Gold in Atlanta, which is a pretty big program as well with multiple sites. With the TAC Titans, which is where like Claire Curzon came out of. So I was kind of on the front end of that club, starting and developing. And then where I came from just prior to LAC was the Bowles School in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where like Caleb Dressel came out of, Ryan Murphy came out of. So it was a pretty historic high school program and club program as well. So, and again, been here for 2 years, and we've seen massive growth with this site. It's came in with the site probably around 60 kids, and now we're over 300
Oh, wow.
in just 2 years. So it's been huge growth, and we've got a great staff at Northwest. So I certainly not been done by myself by any means. So it's been a group effort that's created this great environment for the kids that we have. So we're really looking forward to what the future holds with this site. And we've already got a number of kids that are already excelling at some pretty high levels. So it's hopefully we're just going to keep growing from there.
I was going to say that's such an undertaking, like creating a new site, and you guys got the nicest facilities. That's what you got to do, I guess. Start a new site. Um, that's awesome. So, kind of speaking of growing things, um, you're kind of starting to grow open water swimming there too, right?
No, absolutely. I come from a background with open water swimming, so it's one of the things that Coach Jason has kind of tasked me with was is trying to help open water, not only with LAC but just even here in Texas, uh, grow a little bit more, get a little more participation. It We started off last year. The first year I was here, I was just kind of getting my feet wet, so to speak. Just trying to learn the kind of the lay of the land in Texas, North Texas. Because I'm not from here. I
There's
didn't grow up.
flat.
I didn't grow up here. I mean, I grew up in Florida. Um, but most of my coaching career has been spent more in the Southeast. And so this was kind of our first venture coming a little more west, so it's been definitely a learning curve for me. But we've been trying to see how we can grow it. And we started off, I guess, this past year on New Year's Eve. We actually did like a pool open water thing at our pool and invited the other sites. And we had about 200 kids that came, from all the sites. And we set up different courses on each side of the pool, with buoys. And, we kind of made it a much more of a fun format. It wasn't like it was a competition, but it wasn't really competition. It was more, let's just expose the kids to it a little bit at a real, very basic level. And it was a lot of fun, and a lot of the kids
I
enjoyed
was
it.
there for that one. That one was it was cool to see. What made you guys want to do? I mean, I guess it's January, but it is Texas. What made you guys want to do that in the pool instead of like an actual open water?
Well, I had been at that previous fall. I was at an open water event with my son Jacob, that's now swimming at LSU, and he's big into open water. And I ran into a guy named Taylor Abbott, and he used to swim for University of Tennessee and was on the national team for USA Swimming for open water as well. And I got talking to him more and about just introducing kids to open water, and he actually gave me the idea. Why don't you just do something in the pool first? Just to give kids exposure, because it can be it is a big change. It is from going from being able to see everything, seeing the black line on the bottom of the pool, to potentially not being able to see anything underneath
A
you.
visibility
Yeah.
piece. Yeah.
So it does, and I'll use a quick example of a story. Is it was actually at Open Water Nationals and Junior Nationals this past spring with Evan Whitty and Gabby Ehrgerter, and they neither one of them had actually even done open water before, other than the thing we did in the pool. And when Gabby got in, and it was in a lake, so it wasn't like in the ocean, but when she first got in, she kind of freaked out a little bit
Oh
because
yeah.
she couldn't see anything, and it was just a different experience for her. And then
Well,
I
most
kind of had her, I
water
had her get.
too, the water's moving a lot more.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so it's just different. So you have to look for ways to kind of, let's try to expose kids at a gradual rate. And we're looking at doing some, an open water event this fall, probably down in the Austin area. And then we're actually looking at hopefully hosting an actual open water event next spring.
Like one of the
And
lakes around Dallas.
exactly. So that, so there were some of the beginning ways, that we're looking to try and keep growing, the sport within the team and hopefully within the LSC in North Texas. So
Now, is there a point where it gets too, like, is there an ideal time of year to do it around here where you're like, oh, too hot, too cold, sort of thing? Or is it just kind of like, no, you're gonna suffer?
no, and well, and that's been the biggest struggle here is, even just in my conversations with Coach Jason, that's been, in North Texas for a long time, the dramatic weather season changes that we have here in North Texas, that has been the challenge, is trying to find where the ideal time is, because obviously, we're just coming out of, some blazing hot temperatures, here in the last few weeks. And so, yeah, you don't want to put kids in a situation where their bodies can overheat, in 90-degree plus weather or temperatures in the water. So it's, you don't really want to do anything on the tail end of the summer or going into the first few weeks of September generally. And then, just like as we've just seen now, we went from
Like literally today, yeah.
110 degrees and now it's like 70 degrees outside. So it's, we're going through these dramatic changes. So I think what we've kind of identified as some ideal times would be either late April to, maybe end of May. And then uh, probably around the middle to end of October. Well, probably middle to, middle September, middle of October, maybe being able to do something in North Texas.
Yeah,
Now
where it's
there is, and
stable.
there are more events down in South Texas,
Mm.
where they're putting on more events. But that's the struggle is just the weather changes that we have here are really, it's really hard to find those ideal times. And not that and that's part of the challenge with open water is it's never going to be ideal. It's, that's part of the fun of open water is the environmental changes that
Predictability.
happen all the time.
Mhm.
So but yeah, I think we're making some progress in that direction for
And
sure.
I do think like starting it in a pool is not the worst thing because it can make it a little less intimidating. Like, there was a good show out for, you know, even with it being New Year's and people traveling, there was a lot of kids there. And I remember seeing, the little kids, it was like pretty good. And then the senior boys just elbows out. I have a great video of one of them. Ow, you kicked me in the face. You hear someone off to the side. That's open water swimming.
Oh yeah, no, it was fun, and it gets pretty intense at times, especially not, you're not following that black line, so it's, now there are certainly rules within open water, and we didn't really enforce that kind of stuff in that event, but there are open water rules to, contact and things like that. So I guess just for, folks that maybe don't understand it, there, I don't want to scare anybody off that it's just a free for all. So, there are some parameters around, contact and things like that in a actual race,
No
that's
drowning your
sanctioned.
opponents, right? That's it. It's the only rule.
Bring your boxing gloves with you.
No, no, that's cool. So, well, I think, speaking of that, like as a coach, how do you prepare your swimmers who are interested in open water? Like, do you just tell them certain things? Would you have certain drills you'd have them do?
Well, so open water in the challenge for open water is there is and there isn't a good way to train for it. So, most people don't have, access to just going out to a lake and just swimming or just out to the ocean and just swimming, things like that. So you have to get a little creative, in order to prepare for, a competition. Obviously a lot of the training that you do can just be done in a pool. And I would say even at the highest levels, in open water, not only in the US, but around the world, uh, a lot of the training is done in a pool still. So it's, now there are things, that you can do to do some preparation for going to an open water event, just as I did for when we went to open water nationals and junior nationals in the spring, is I had, a couple of practices where, with open water, there's, you have buoys that you're, in a certain course that you're swimming on. So there's buoys usually set up on it in, different in different formats. Could be in a triangle, could be in a rectangle, a square, whatever, whatever the meet host or the race host decides what the course is. And so you have to be able to sight and look at those buoys as you're swimming. So one of the things we would do is we would have them, swim for a bit, kind of pick their head up, kind of sight where the buoy's at, then put your head back down. But you have to do that, about every, maybe 20 strokes or, 25 strokes, something like that. So we would do sets, where they would do that. And I've had, I would put things at the end of the lane, like a kickboard standing up that's like a bright color, and then they have to kind of poke their head up, as they're swimming, sight where that kickboard is at. And then I did put, as we got a little closer to the event, I actually had some buoys that we had used from that open water event back in December, and I put them in the water and we moved a couple of lane lines and I had them swimming around the buoys, working on how to go around the buoys. But we kind of did that separate outside of a regular swim practice.
Mm.
So, those are things you can't do to prepare, for some open water stuff. Or, the other thing I've done in the past, in order to get used to the crowd, because usually you're in a group of, I would say probably 25 or more, athletes that are getting ready to swim, and it's kind of a battle at the beginning to kind of establish your position. So I would put kids like swimming side by side in a lane and have, four or five of them. So they're shoulder to shoulder, basically, in
You
order
have
to get
blocks,
used.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And in order to get used to, swimming with a group of people right there beside you,
Yeah.
so those are different things you can do, in order to prepare for the open water. But, you know, the other thing, is just looking for events, more local events that you can participate in, just to get that experience. And, obviously with triathlons, you can do things like that, and they do a lot of swims in open, in lakes and things like that. Uh, but those are some of the things you can do both outside the pool and, in a lake.
So you said there's like different events. Is it just different distances, or what's the difference between like say a triathlon swim and an open water event?
Well, obviously with the triathlon, you've got the swimming leg, you got the bike leg,
But like the
you got the
swimming
running leg.
leg of the triathlon versus, just an open water event.
It can vary. It just depends on what the race, the race coordinators decide how they want to format it. But generally, with the triathlons, generally the swim part is a little bit shorter, just because, depending on what the race is for a triathlon, it might be a little bit shorter. But generally with open water, depending on the ages, it can vary from a 1K up to a 5K, maybe even a 10K in some cases, in the open water races. Now, if I had somebody that was just starting out, I would probably say, like, you probably just want to start out with maybe like a 2K or a 1K, and kind of start from there, and then kind of, start to work your way up if it's something that you really enjoy doing.
Is it similar, do they just pack everyone in together, or is it heats by age and gender and such?
So they'll usually if you have a multi ages doing it, is they'll usually break it out similar to a swim meet, is in the pool, is they'll break it into age groups, and then have different starting times. Generally they're not going to have, kids on a race course at the same time. um, they'll usually allow them to complete the course, or complete the race before they start the next race. But it's generally different ages. Like, just for an example, I mean, when Jacob, my middle son, started getting into open water, and he was actually 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old at the time, and we were in North Carolina at the time, and he did his first one was just an 800-meter swim.
Is it in the
And
ocean?
no, it was in a lake,
Okay.
and it was right
That makes a
along.
difference too, lake versus an ocean.
Yeah, yeah, and it was right along the edge of the lake. So, if any of the kids kind of got freaked out or anything like that, they were pretty close to land, and it wasn't a very far distance. And then it kind of went up from there. So, like 11, 12s, I think they did like a 2K. The 13, 14s did a 3K, and then the 15 and ups did a 5K. But they would stagger the start times, throughout or start pretty early in the morning. They generally started with the older guys first, and then, generally you start everybody together, unless you have, a really large group. You could also start, do it in heats, because usually you have some kind of a timing, apparatus there as well. So there's usually, you have some kind of an ankle bracelet that has a timing chip in it, or, um, you know, and we didn't do that at the one we did in the pool. We just did, by watch or whatever, but just because we were trying to keep it very, very basic and informal. But a lot of the other races that we do, there's usually you have some kind of a timing chip attached to your ankle or your wrist or something like that.
So what do you think some of the this is bias coming from me, but what do you think some of the mental considerations are that differ from swimming? Like it sounds like there's a lot of focus and there's just so many kind of that fear piece, you're battling people, you're in a stranger environment, can't see as much. How would you prepare your swimmers for that side of it?
Well, you have to, one of the biggest things with open water is that you're swimming generally longer races, and you have to get used to the fact that you're going to be swimming for a long, relatively long period of time, with not much going on. I mean, you're not doing flip turns, so in some of the preparation things, I would do some really long swims just for them to get used to how to occupy their mind,
Yeah.
for longer periods of time, not a whole lot going on. Because you could
Really
be,
zone out.
yeah, no, and it does happen for sure. And you have to figure out ways to keep yourself in the moment, in the race, going, while you're swimming, because yeah, you can kind of get lost and like you said, zone out, and then all of a sudden, you kind of find yourself swimming by yourself, and and not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but
Does that ever happen though, that people just kind of veer off course by accident?
oh, absolutely,
Do
absolutely. I
they
know.
coach for that, or do they just let them go?
Usually there's safety people on the course for the open water. So if somebody starts to go really off course, they'll kind of go over and hey, you might want to start coming back in this way a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that happened to Jacob. Again, my middle son that does open water, he won the junior national 7.5K. I
That's
guess it was
awesome.
3 years ago now, in Florida, and he was winning the race probably by at least a good 30 seconds to a minute. But and this was on Fort Myers Beach, so it was actually swimming. He was actually swimming in the Gulf, and on the last lap that he was swimming on the backside of the course, which was out in the Gulf a little bit more, he kind of lost track of where he was at. He was actually swimming out into the Gulf, and the commentators on the race were, even making a comment like, "Hey, I think he'll probably you know, realize where he's at, but he's kind of swimming off course here a bit, and he did. He corrected himself, eventually, but yeah, it absolutely does
Okay,
happen.
after
So
like what happened, like, did he just kind of zone out?
he did. He just kind of was in that zone of just trying to swim, and didn't sight for a little bit, and it was really during that one particular race, it was really wavy. So it was kind of hard sometimes to sight and be able to see where the buoy was at. So I think he just kind of got into that zone, and he was just swimming and kind of lost track of where he was. And fortunately corrected and still won the race, but yeah, it definitely happens. So you have to get used to, swimming for longer periods of time with, you know, are you singing to yourself? Are you trying to focus on keeping your stroke rate up? Things like that. You got to figure those kinds of things out, and how to keep your mind occupied and stay in the race.
Well, I think that is hard because, in pool swimming, sometimes we want that. Like, can you get into flow state, get in that zone, versus no, don't just go on autopilot. Like you need to be present and think the whole time. That's hard.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Does Jacob still get to do any underwater open water? Hopefully he's still doing underwaters.
No, he does. He did the open water nationals back in the spring, and he may be doing one or two this fall because he's at LSU now, so he's kind of in college and doing the college thing and swimming there. So, uh, he some of his goals are pretty high in open water. He loves it. He'd love to have an opportunity to make an Olympic team for open water if that's something that's in the mix for him. But yeah, he still loves doing it, tries to do it. It's just hard right now trying to fit it into a college type schedule. So
Right. So he's not trying like this Olympic cycle, maybe next.
well, there is a possibility this winter that he could have a shot. That I just don't know if he's decided what he's going to do. There's an opportunity to make a world championship team is in February at a open water event that's in Israel in December. So I don't think they've fully decided on if he's going to go to it or not yet. But that would be in order to try and make. It's really hard to make it in the Olympics in open water because they only take a certain number of swimmers in the event because of overcrowding.
Mm,
So it's really hard to make it. You have to not only be selected by your country, through whatever their event is, like open water nationals, but then you also have to qualify through some other open water events that happen throughout the year in order to like accumulate like a certain number of points and then be ultimately invited to compete in the Olympics. So there's kind of a multi-stage to it for open water.
a
So it's a
lot of
little more challenging,
yeah.
versus the regular pool Olympic trials that the US does, where it's just, okay, top two, you make the Olympic team and move on to
Much more
that.
straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, is there any specific age that you think is like you need to get into open water swimming by, or you need to wait until this age?
No, and I think that's one of the beauties of that. I wouldn't say different sport, but it's certainly a different avenue or different pathway. But I, I know there are plenty of open water events that go on that are people that are swimming in their 70s, 80s, and all the way down. But as far as the age to start, I mean, you can start at any age, but certainly I think there are events out there, that are you're able to do, if it's something that you're interested in, even at 9, 10 years old. I mean, if I even think back to, Jacob starting, I mean, he started when he was 9, 10 years old, and there are events out there for kids to get involved in it, start doing it, at a relatively young age. Um, but I think, you have to understand that it's a lot different than swimming in a pool, and I think just having that level of expectation going in, I think has to be really clear, especially starting out at a young age, so they don't panic being in a lake or in the ocean versus being, in a pool.
Yeah.
So I think you have to, as a coach or as a parent, is setting that expectation, that it is different. And you just have to be willing to understand that. And there are some kids, I mean, even like Katie Ledecky, I mean, as great as she is, she hates open water. Like she just doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
You
It's,
know,
I mean, it's psychologically, I think, a big difference.
Yeah. But then you look at somebody like Katie Grimes, that's, one of the best distance swimmers we have in the US right now on the women's side. And she does both. I mean, she loves open water and she already made actually the US Olympic team in open water, just this past summer. But she's also got a legitimate shot at making the Olympic team in the pool as well. So, and then there's some people that just love doing open water and that's all they focus on. Um, you know, the one that comes to mind right now is Ashley Twitchell. She's in her 30s now, but she's made Olympic teams for the U.S. In open water, and that's pretty much what she focused on most of her career, at least out of college.
Yeah.
So you get a wide range. So you get
Right.
some people that love both, you get some people that, heck no, I do not want anything to do with open water. I want to be able to see the bottom, and then you have some people that's just what they want to focus on, and compete at.
Cool. So we're running out of time, but do you have any suggestions for, if a parent or a swimmer wants to get more involved in open water swimming, where should they start?
Well, I think first is just start with your coach. Talk to your coach about it. I think that would be the first step. And asking them, how can I do this? How can I get involved? And then certainly, if from that point, if they're interested, just either the swimmer or the parent or the coach, can certainly reach out to me and ask me if we are gonna doesn't look like we're gonna probably put an open water event on the schedule
Mm.
that's going to come up in October. So they'll have to travel a little bit to get to go to it, but that would certainly be an opportunity. But I think just expressing that interest, and wanting to do it, and then certainly reaching out to your coach, and you can certainly reach out to me if you have any questions about open water. But there's open water is not quite as organized as USA Swimming in terms of like competition. So there's a lot of competitions that go on that are not related to, you know, necessarily to USA Swimming at times, but are run by different organizations like Masters, or there's Swim Across America that does open water swims to raise money for cancer.
Mm.
uh, and I know there's one actually coming up. I think actually it might be this weekend, as a matter of fact, that's actually here in the Dallas area.
Oh, the weather
Yeah.
cooperated.
So yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different avenues to do it with open water. It's just, again, it's just I don't want to say disorganized, but it's, there are more organizations that just put on, open water events, that are outside of like what our swimmers within LAC are typically used to, being on a schedule. We sign up through Team Unify, and then we all show up at this one particular pool,
Mm.
and so they're it's not quite as organized as that. So that's where talking to your coach or reaching out to me is probably the best way to to kind of start that process.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah, and then we'll probably, I think we're going to try and do that, that the open water thing, hopefully at the end of the year again.
Mm.
Probably it would probably maybe be like a New Year's Eve thing again as well, and just allow the kids to be able to, because
Kind
the
of
only
different.
reason we did it on that date was because we had the pool space, and we knew there wasn't going to be a lot of other groups at the pool, so we were able to use the whole pool for that event. So
Yeah, I think that was really cool. Gives them an opportunity to dip a toe in without diving all the way in.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's a lot. I mean, open water is a lot of fun.
yeah.
It gives you something, gives you a different pathway. It gives you, it's a lot. At least right now, it's a lot easier to make like a national team in open water than it is pool.
Mm.
So it's open water in the U.S. is not as big as it is in Europe. Uh, and in Europe, they actually have a circuit that professionals swim on.
Mm.
And so it's extremely competitive, in Europe. So it's not quite as big here in the US, at least not yet. But maybe that may change here in the near future.
Yeah, just keep growing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. I mean, I learned a lot. I didn't know a lot about open water swimming. So, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
anytime.
And if anybody has any questions, they should reach out to you. That's great.
Sounds great. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for your time.